This is Musical Talk.
Musical Talk.
The UK's independent musical theatre podcast.
Musical Talk. The UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello, you are listening to Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. You're also listening right now to the overture of the Broadway musical comedy Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, which is making its way to London this spring. Musical Talk was lucky enough to be invited to the press launch, so in this episode you're going to be hearing interviews with Jerry Mitchell, the director and choreographer of this production, and Catherine Kingsley, who is starring in it also. You'll also be hearing from Rufus, Hound, and also the show's musical director, Richard John. So I'm going to hand you over to all those interviews now. I started off the proceedings with my friend Robert Gordon, and this is what we had to say.
Well, hello, I'm here with my good friend Professor Robert Gordon from... been on the podcast a couple of times, but you are most famous in the world of musical theatre for being you run the only musical theatre writing course in Europe, don't you?
I think it's the only course in Europe that's devoted to musical theatre writing, but also to musical theatre producing. So it's the only postgraduate course in this country and in Europe. I teach at Goldsmiths College at the University of London.
We are here at the Dirty Rotten Scoundrels press event. Loads and loads of people here, and we've just seen 4 songs from this musical. Now, I've seen this musical when it originally opened on Broadway, I think about 7 years ago. It's still the best show I've ever seen on Broadway, and I'm utterly thrilled that it's opening here at the Savoy Theatre, kind of doing the Legally Blonde story, isn't it?
Yes, I think it looks to me, I haven't seen the movie, and I haven't seen the stage production on Broadway, but I think it looks to me like it's very much following in the footsteps of Legally Blonde, but it seems to me that it's going to have a wider appeal, because it is based on a film that was successful and that a lot of people in Britain would have seen. And it's got at least two very big West End stars.
3 anyway.
Yes,
Samantha
3.
Bond,
absolutely.
Rufus, Hound.
She's not in a starring role, but she's the sort of featured role.
Comedy role.
But she's certainly well known. Samantha Bond, Rufus, Hound, and of course the great Robert Lindsay, who everybody will know, and perhaps a lot will still remember from Me and My Girl more than 20 years ago. So I think what it looks like is a very American show.
Absolutely.
It's interesting that the last show that Robert Lindsay did, the last musical on stage, was an English musical which was very successful eventually on Broadway. Here is a show that's been already successful on Broadway, which an English star is going to introduce to the West End.
Now, the thing about this piece is that his character is meant to be British. And I noticed and I don't know if Rufus Hound is going to be playing his character as American or British, but it kind of lends itself to both worlds, because when I saw it on Broadway, John Lithgow played the character as that kind of thing that Angela Lansbury does. Is he British? Is he American? You don't really know.
Yes.
And they changed a lot of the text in the version, because we've just seen 4 songs. They've changed a lot of the lyrics and a lot of the script references. They're obviously gearing it towards a British audiences, and I'm sure when the show starts at previews, they'll be gauging how the laughs are working, and because this is an incredibly funny show, the proceedings are being directed today by Broadway. Do we say legend, Robert?
Well, I use the word sparingly. No, I think only Harold Prince and Bob Fosse are Broadway legends in this context. Jerry Mitchell, a very well-known Broadway director and choreographer.
And he's done this show, he's bringing it back to London. Now, he mentioned in his opening speech a kind of collaboration that he's doing with ATG. Tell us what you found that very interesting, didn't you, Robert?
Yes, I think that we have no real directing managements, who are at the moment, or who have been in the last few years, developing new British musicals. Now, I'm not sure that ATG are trying to develop new British musicals, though presumably they will do some, but they're certainly wanting to bring new musicals to Britain and to produce them in Britain. And what I find interesting, although there's an American director-choreographer attached to this, as you've already said, they are doing this as a British production. not as an American production that's transferred to London. And I think one of the big mistakes that was made in bringing a chorus line to the Palladium was that it was an entirely American production, American producers, American British performers, but American creative team. And they just transplanted it to the Palladium. And quite frankly, although the production itself was very good, I think the show is now dated. It was commercially, I think, a disaster because they hadn't worked out whether or not a British audience from outside London would pay to come and see a chorus line. And they didn't.
Well, I think this show will be a success. It's not in a huge theatre, it's in the Savoy, and it's a very, very funny show, and you really liked the songs you heard, didn't you, Rob?
I think the songs are delightful. I thought one song in particular was utterly charming and more than just generic.
I think
three of them were...
That.
Yes, I think three of them were very good, very well-crafted generic Broadway songs, but who can complain about a good generic Broadway song?
Exactly, and David Yazbek is very good. Do you know his Full Monty?
Yes, I know the Full Monty. I happen not to think the Full Monty is a great musical. I think it would have been better done as a British musical rather than transplanted to New York. But Yazbek is a real professional.
Yeah.
What struck me immediately, the first number began, was what a brilliant dancer Robert Lindsay is. I mean, for an actor who's not a trained dancer but who's got now dance experience, he dances like a dream. He's witty and he's sharp and he's charming in his dance style.
Was Me and My Girl dance heavy?
Yes, quite a lot of dancing, but, what the Americans would have called hoofing rather than, real...
choreography.
Dancing, yes. And I think this show has a lot of hoofing. It seems to me, again, it's very generic in a good sense. It's a typical Broadway show.
It gives them what they want. Fans of the show will know what I mean by that.
Absolutely. It's not a Matthew Bourne type show. It's really more singing in the rain type dancing.
We were then lucky enough to chat with the show's musical director, Richard John.
Yes, I'd like to ask Richard a question about the Americanness of the show. I must just say at this point that Richard John was for a number of years the teacher of composition on the MA in Musical Theatre at Goldsmiths, and he's a very talented musician himself, and as well as being experienced as an MD, he's also a musical theatre composer. So Richard, as a composer, writing, although you're Australian,
half Australian, absolutely, half Welsh, half Australian.
Okay, and resident in this country, you'll obviously have what one might call a British approach to writing a show.
That's right, yes.
But you're now conducting a show which I think has a very strong American feel based on an American movie, American creative team. For you, is there any difference? Does it feel that you have to capture something which is very much a Broadway sound? How do you approach this?
It is often a very important consideration for recreating musicals, Broadway musicals especially. What I found with Dirty Rotten Scoundrels and working closely with David Yazbek, the composer and lyricist, is that he's actually gone for more of a universal sound, and the choices of music generally have cultural references, historical references, or strong musical references which go to the heart of what he may be writing about. So without giving too much away, if he wants to recreate a moment for somebody who's masquerading as, say, somebody who's Viennese, he will capture a Viennese waltz. If he wants to catch something that sort of lives within a Louis Prima world, like an extract you saw earlier, like This, Like That, he will catch that, rather than going for specifically a Broadway sound.
Well, that song reminds me of a Nina Simone number. Do you know?
Oh, yes, my baby just cares for me as well. Yes,
There's a strong connection between Primus and Nina Simone, isn't it?
Those sort of, I think they are intentional references from David Yazbek, because it will have a resonance within the mind of the listener, and of course the whole point of that number is very much like My Baby Just Cares for Me, or something.
And of course, sorry.
No.
The show is set in the south of France, so I can see there's a lot of flavouring. Although French music has been very influenced by American jazz, there is a sort of feel. Even Nina Simone, in an odd kind of way, has got that chic French sound sometimes. My Baby Just Cares for Me.
Exactly.
It could be a French jazz song.
And when you come and hear the wonderful vocal, we have an absolutely extraordinary ensemble for Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and when you come and hear the sounds, it's very much a use of the French jazz harmonies as well as that sort of Americanization that you were speaking of earlier.
And I've seen the show on Broadway. It's still the best show I've ever seen on Broadway, so I'm thrilled it's coming here. any I mean, because I know they rewrote the opening for the tour in the States, but now they put the old one.
Well, actually, the old one is now a new one. It's been completely restructured yet again, specifically to really land the whole conceit of the show. Getting back to your question about the musical language and the fact that David Yazbek has done what he has done, the idea of being a con artist is to give people what they want and appear to be what they think that they want you to be. So you get that in the sound, you get that in the look, and certainly in the restructured opening, it's very clear what's going on. It's wonderful.
Just to shift the focus slightly, as musical director, are you responsible on this show for teaching the songs to the cast, or is that being done by the musical supervisor?
It's a joint team, a joint effort. Our musical supervisor, Matthew Bryn, works very closely with David Yazbek and has also working with him on Woman on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. So they've been working together a lot. So the two of us work in tandem. Obviously, putting on a show of this size in a limited time is many hands make light work.
One of the things that I thought was charming today was to see, a famous British film and television actress, Samantha Bond, not known for musical theatre, but singing charmingly as an actress, not as a musical theatre belter. But I think that whoever's worked with her has done a very good job. But she's done a lovely job, because it seems to me it's really nice in a show like this, which is a musical comedy, to see actors singing, and actors singing with that kind of charm and confidence.
It's one of my favourite approaches, actually, to all musical theatre repertoire, is getting to the heart of it. So it isn't just about the sound, it is very much about the intention, the reason that a song might have been written, and Samantha does that beautifully.
And she gives it the comedy that it needs, doesn't she?
Her understanding and the comic timing and her insights are wonderful.
And does she, but as part of the process, would someone like you or one of the team, in a way, do some vocal coaching for her?
Certainly. And we have, as part of the team, we have vocal coaches. We also have singing tutors and coaches to work on technique, as well as the sort of work that we do musically.
Because they're doing 7 shows a day, they have to last.
Exactly.
And Robert Lindsay hasn't done a musical in a while, so how is it easing him back into... Because he looked like an absolute pro in the songs we saw, but how is it easing him back into his familiar, his... I guess not so familiar shoes. It's
as you say, absolutely. He is a pro. He's come back to it like riding a bike, like getting back on the horse. It has been a while, of course, since the great triumph of Me and My Girl, but he has kept up all his theatrical chops.
It's interesting to see someone as good an actor, quote unquote, legitimate theatre actor as Robert Lindsay, dance like a professional. He's just got such a style as a dancer. Obviously, he had to do that in Me and My Girl.
Yes,
but you don't often get, you do get some actors who sing well, but you very seldom get an actor who can dance as well as he can.
That's right. He's got wonderful poise, and he's a stickler for the details. So
a good band you're working with? Is it bigger or smaller? Or?
It's slightly smaller than Broadway. It's perfect size for the Savoy Theatre. We have a 13-piece orchestra, and can't wait for the orchestral rehearsals to begin in 2 weeks. Be lovely to upgrade from our rehearsal piano.
Well, it's great talking to you, Richard.
Likewise,
and I have
you.
to say, one of the nice things about meeting people who are like yourself involved in professional theatre is every now and again one meets someone who's not only incredibly talented but also an incredibly nice human being, and I can say that of you.
Robert, thank you very much. It's lovely to see you.
We're then joined by Rufus Hound.
As somebody coming from stand-up comedy, you're now having to sing, dance and do the comedy in the show.
Yeah.
And it's obviously quite a demanding show. You've got a very big role in the show. It's
Yeah.
one of the 2 enormous roles.
At this point, Rufus's heart rate was racing.
What we saw today was a really proficient performance. Yes. What I liked about both you and Samantha Bond in particular was that you seem to be approaching this as actors who sing and dance as an extra. That's no insult. But for me, as a theatre director and an acting teacher, that's the right way for musical comedy, that it shouldn't be sung. It shouldn't be done by, West End belters, with huge voices, because it's not going to be right for musical comedy.
No.
But you do it with great panache and great charm and detail in the lyrics. Can you say a little bit about that? Was it a big journey from stand-up comedy to this?
Well, I think from stand-up comedy to this would have been quite a jolt. I'd been very fortunate that I had done, I did a play at the Soho Theatre, and that was my kind of reintroduction to doing a lot of drama. I did a lot of drama at school. I went to school Frensham Heights, which had a big kind of history of great drama teaching and things like that, and has produced, Jim Sturgis of late and Hattie Morahan and, some really brilliant people, Gunnar Cawthroy. So I did lots of that growing up, and I always thought that's what I'd end up doing, but then left that school, went to college, and at college just was taught by somebody whose experience was the other end of the business, which is had tried and failed, and so her message to anyone wanting to try was don't bother.
It's a good warning, isn't it?
I think, it's one of those things that just acts as another filter, isn't it? Like, the more somebody can shake you off the path, the less on that path you probably, deserve to be.
And why did you go into stand-up rather than, initially when you were already ready to...
It was twofold, really. I grew up through a kind of stand-up comedy boom, and a lot of my heroes were stand-ups. In the way that, other people had Led Zeppelin and The Clash, I had Bill Hicks and Lee and Herring and Eddie Izzard and those people, Sean Hughes. So it felt like the showing off gene was met by doing stand-up. And I think as well there's a sort of mental journey that stand-ups are on where they feel like outsiders, where they're on the outside looking in all the time. I think actors share a lot of that. I hear Robert Lindsay talking about being an actor, and it's like actors love watching people. And it's like it is that. It's about looking around you and feeling that you're not necessarily at the heart of it.
I've seen the show on Broadway, and for a stand-up comedian, this role is brilliant because I've never... The floors of the theatre were shaking with laughter. It is still the funniest show I've ever seen, and I'm thrilled that it's now here in our fair shores for me to see it whenever I like. So I guess coming from a stand-up comedy role to this role is great for you, because Great Big Stuff isn't really a belty song. It's a rap number, so you can kind of play with it a bit, and you've got some very funny lyrics.
Yeah. It's a spoken word thing, really, but obviously we're not mic'd in this room, and you're all sat by the piano, so you've got to kind of, ping it out a bit more.
I know it off by heart anyway, but it was okay for me. But so I'm sure the role will be absolutely brilliant for you.
Well, I hope so. I've been asked to do a few things like this and always said no, because this isn't my, my skill set, really. But when they asked me to do this, they insisted I audition, which is the first time that's ever happened. I said, no, you're fine. No, we insist. And I was like, well, okay, I'll go and I'll show them how wrong they are about this. But the moment I met, you've just been talking to Richard John, the MD. The moment I met him, we spent a couple of hours learning one of the songs from the show. And the idea of getting to stand on a stage and sing some of these numbers night after night after night felt like an incredible thing to be asked to do. And I just sort of fell in love with the idea of doing it, really. And I'm glad. What's interesting to me is the history of this show on Broadway was one where it sort of had mixed reviews, and then people really enjoyed it, but then maybe it was up against some other shows that were doing better, and
casting relied heavily.
It slightly fell between the cracks in some respects on Broadway, and other ways not so much. But all of the British people I know who went to see it on Broadway say it was their favourite musical that they saw.
It is.
And I think there is something with a unique kind of British twist to it. It's kind of class system and things like that we're really fans of. So I think this is probably more likely to be a huge hit here in the way that maybe it wasn't quite a huge hit on Broadway.
And Blonde was.
I'm sure it's going to be a huge hit here, and I'm sure you're going to be a huge success in it.
The hugely charming Rufus Hound there, and finally we were treated to an interview with Tony Award-winning director and choreographer Jerry Mitchell, and also Catherine Kingsley.
I'm Jerry Mitchell. I'm the director-choreographer of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and the CEO of Jerry Mitchell Productions, I guess.
And I'm Catherine Kingsley, and I play Christine Colgate.
I have to say, Jerry, I've seen Dirty Rotten Scoundrels on Broadway with John Lithgow and Norbert Leo Butts, and it is still the best thing I've ever seen on Broadway. It was so funny, and I'm so thrilled that the show is finally making its way to London. How has it changed between all those years ago and now?
Well, I was the choreographer, obviously, right? So I was close to the show, and then we did a national tour, and we made changes to the national tour after the Broadway production. And I've made changes here to set up the character of Lawrence a little bit better as the prince, and him taking the women in the opening sequence where he's getting the jewels and money. And then because it was Robert Lindsay, and I knew I had Robert Lindsay. The number on Broadway, Given What You Want, was an opening number. It's actually the second number in our show.
It didn't quite land as an opening.
No, it didn't. And I think it's going to land big time with Robert getting done up and taking the money, all that stuff he was putting in the briefcase, he actually gets in the prologue. So he's now packing his briefcase to go deposit it at the Swiss bank. And I wanted to use his gifts. And I know Robert is a song and dance man, and I knew what he could do. So I built the number, Given What They Want, around that. And David Yazbek never intended it to be an opening number. He didn't write it like that. He wrote it as a much more jazzy idea. So when we started talking about that and shaping it for Robert, this is what we came up with. And I think it's going to be brilliant. I think Robert's incredible. I think when people see him sing and dance and do that hat stuff, they're going to go crazy.
It gives me goosebumps when I see him do what he
he's
does.
He's a pro.
Yeah.
I mean, he really is a pro.
Do you think it's something that the Brits have over the Americans, or is it something that...
Who is the great team? That one of them just passed away, but the other guy passed. I want to say Emin. They do this.
Malcolm and Wise.
For those of you for those of you listening at home,
they had the
Malcolm
biggest
and Wise.
Christmas specials ever.
Yeah.
It's that kind of partnership is something that's very specific to British comedy. Yeah.
It's integral to this piece, isn't it? The chemistry.
Yeah. And I think Rufus and Robert are going to have that. You know,
It looks like it from what we've seen.
And they're just discovering it. And when they get in front of an audience in Manchester, which is why I wanted to go out of town, I have a feeling I'm going to be like one of the princesses trying to get a bridle in their mouth and pull them back.
That'll be me.
Yeah.
I wonder if you think, particularly, if you've thought about this, that you are specifically gearing the show in a slightly different way for a British audience. Is that something that's in your mind?
Not specifically for a British audience, but specifically for a European audience. I always thought that the story landed here, on this side of the pond, much more than it did there because of the type of humor it is. It's written in the south of France.
We were saying that one of the things that we were saying was that just like Legally Blonde, the Legally Blonde, that seemed to be almost more popular in Britain than it was in the States. We think this one for the kind of humor.
It is. I think it is. I think the humor of this show in the Savoy is going to land big time.
Yeah.
I just do.
I think so. And the Savoy is a good theatre for it.
Yeah.
Yes, such a beautiful.
Can I ask you, Catherine, do you find it different, a slightly different experience working with an American director choreographer than working with British directors? Because obviously, we do have a certain kind of tradition, and our tradition of musical theatre especially is rather different from Broadway, though much as we love Broadway shows. For you as a performer, what's new about working with Jerry?
That was part of the reason why I really, really wanted to work with Jerry, because I think he's amazing, but also I'd love to work with an American director, and it's. I would say there has been a precision and a positive energy towards everything that we do that isn't always the way in this country. I mean, it's a very different approach. Sometimes we can sit for 2 weeks around a table and not actually get on our feet and do anything, whereas with Jerry we've very much been on our feet from day one. And I think that's the best way of working, because we're theatre animals, and it's good to just get it into your body and to start to play, and then situations and comedy occur once you're actually on your feet doing it, rather than intellectualizing something for hours.
We don't have the tradition of the director-choreographer so much in this
No.
country,
Yeah.
which is why presumably Jerry does get people on their feet early on.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I have it all. I have it all planned out before all the choreography's planned out. But I'm very much a person who's on his front foot. I'm very much like this. So I work like that. I'm like this. I'm never like this.
But for me, I find that really inspiring, and it encourages me to be a bit more front-footed too. And you can kind of keep up, and that way you work quickly, but you also discover things constantly.
Well, Catherine and Jerry, thank you very, very much
Thank
for joining
you.
us on Musical
Thank
Talk,
you.
and good luck with the show.
Thank you very much.
Catherine Kingsley and Jerry Mitchell there discussing the UK premiere of David Yazbek's wonderful musical Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. On the 12th of February it starts at the Opera House in Manchester, as Jerry mentioned, and that plays until the 22nd of February. Then it goes to the Aylesbury Waterside Theatre on the 26th of February to the 1st of March, and then on the 10th of March it opens at the Savoy Theatre and is currently booking until the 29th of November 2014. Please do go into the show. It's an absolute treat if you like your traditional Broadway American comedies with a bit of a modern, classy European twist. Go and see the show. It is an absolute treat and a delight. Thank you very much for listening to this week's episode of Musical Talk. Sorry it was up a bit late, but I wanted to put this one out, and we weren't allowed to discuss it until today being a Friday. So thank you very much for listening. This episode is copyright Musical Talk 2014. All music is used with permission. Thank you very much and have a lovely weekend. Bye-bye.
Dirty, rotten